From the Bay Area's local news station, we begin now with breaking news.
Breaking news in Walnut Creek. Police firing tear gas to break up a group of protesters. Good evening, everyone. I'm Vicki Liviakis.
And I'm Grant Lotus. Thousands of people showed up for mostly peaceful protests today. The large group eventually making its way onto 680, and police ended up using tear gas. KRON4's Dan Thorne has been in Walnut Creek all day. He joins us now live with the latest there. Dan?
Well, Vicki and Grant, we're here on North Broadway in Walnut Creek. As you said, for much of the afternoon, things were pretty peaceful. The message out here was positive. Lots of police officers were also here, but as we got into the night, things got a little dicey out here. Police tell us there was some vandalism to buildings in the downtown area. Several arrests were also made, and some officers and protesters were also injured in some scuffling. Thousands of people were involved in this protest. It started at Civic Park across from City Hall and eventually marched through the streets. People were holding signs, they were chanting, calling for justice for George Floyd and others who have been killed by police. In most spots around downtown, protesters were met with lots of police officers. North Main Street from Target down through Broadway Plaza had been guarded by police since it closed on Sunday night because of looters who ransacked several stores. Protesters tell us, however, they are against that kind of behavior because it overshadows what they are trying to accomplish.
They see what's on the news, and the news looks like there's a bunch of crazy people breaking in, and it's not. It's people that are taking advantage. This is protesting.
I'm here because our black men are dying all over the nation, and it's not by chance that they're getting shot, I believe, because it has to do with the race.
Well, at one point, protesters returned to the police line at North Broadway where they were asking officers to take a knee with them. Instead, police reminded people that the 6 p.m. curfew was in effect and they needed to leave. Some scuffling then happened with officers, which led to tear gas being deployed. Several people, including myself and my photographer Sean, had to get out of the area. We were tear gassed. It was something that shocked a lot of people considering it was pretty peaceful for most of the day. People were surprised at first to see the officers eventually take a knee, but that was so that they could put gas masks on and then eventually tossed tear gas canisters into the crowd. This is the scene right now that we're looking at. The area pretty much cleared out. We haven't seen many protesters over the last 45 minutes or so. We did see mutual aid police from El Cerrito, San Pablo, and surrounding areas leaving this area, either heading back to their respective police departments or heading to Oakland, where we understand there are thousands of protesters that are still there protesting against racial injustice and protesting for George Floyd. Of course, we will be sure to keep track of what's happening here throughout the night in Walnut Creek if anything else does end up happening, and you could be sure that we'll be here to report it to you.
So Dan, there's a 6 o'clock curfew tonight in Walnut Creek. How did that happen once 6 o'clock struck, and is that what led to the confrontations? What turned it from peaceful to non, and the tear gas? Is it the police were trying to clear people out to go home and they didn't want to do that? What happened?
Right, that was what we observed, was that it was a smaller group of people that eventually came to what was a police line right behind us there at that intersection of North Broadway and Civic Drive. Police told people they had to disperse. It was already past 6 o'clock at this point. Officers were telling people, here's your 5-minute window. We need you to leave this area. People refused to disperse. Officers then went forward on them, telling people to back up, telling people to get out of the area. I mean, even at points where us as reporters, we were being told by police officers that we had to get out of the area, but we were trying to document what was happening here, but they wanted us to get out of the area. Our live truck at one point eventually getting stuck sort of in the fray, but eventually we got everything back here. But yeah, that's what ended up happening. With protesters eventually getting into the face of some police officers and police officers eventually scuffling and then there you have it. Tear gas ends up getting tossed into the crowd.
Yeah, Dan, it seems relatively quiet now, but of course we've been seeing all over cities across the country, really the mayhem begins after dark. Are you being warned that there might be another outbreak?
We haven't been really seeing much in terms of police officers really doing much other than having some of these roadblock signs that are set up here in this area. We'd have to go over to North Main Street to see if there's more of a police presence that's there. The big understanding that we have is, as you mentioned, when the night goes down, when the night falls here in Walnut Creek, people are concerned that there would be more damage that would happen to the Broadway Plaza area. I'm sure police are going to be monitoring the situation. Roads continue to be closed off in this area. So if people do come through, they will be probably met with police officers.
All right, it seems like people have gone home. Dan Thorne live for us tonight in Walnut Creek. Stay safe and thank you for that. Dan alluded to this because there is another protest. It's happening right now in Oakland.
And it's a large one. It's been very peaceful up until now. Oakland under curfew at the moment. This afternoon, you're looking at video from earlier today. A couple thousand people gathered outside of Oakland Technical High School. Many students were in the crowd. As you can see there, a very young group. The group then walked to the area around City Hall. In addition to signs, protesters there are also wearing face masks to prevent the further spread of COVID-19.
If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
And then this was the scene in Washington, D.C. earlier tonight, while President Trump addressed the nationwide protests, which are calling for justice for George Floyd. Police here firing tear gas at peaceful protesters as the president told the nation he supports peaceful demonstrations but condemns the acts of violence.
And while those protesters were being cleared out, President Trump finished up his statement but refused to take questions from reporters.
The reason those peaceful protesters were removed from Lafayette Park right near the White House is because right after the president made his remarks, he made a short walk to St. John's Episcopal Church for a photo opportunity. He held a Bible up right in front of the church, posed for the cameras. American presidents have used St. John's Church for more than 200 years as their own. It's known as the President's Church. Last night, though, part of that church was set on fire after the president's visit to the church. Tonight, the bishop of Episcopal Diocese in Washington said she was outraged by his move.
Let me be clear. The president just used a Bible, the most sacred text of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and one of the churches of my diocese, without permission, as a backdrop for a message antithetical to the teachings of Jesus and everything that our churches stand for. And to do so, as you just said, he sanctioned the use of tear gas by police officers in riot gear to clear the church yard. I am outraged.
Bishop said she didn't know that he was going to come, also noted that he didn't say a prayer. Went on to criticize the president for also failing to acknowledge the agony that the country is experiencing when he made his remarks, especially agony in communities of color.
Well, because many protests are leading to vandalism and looting across the Bay Area, several curfews are now being enforced. As we mentioned a little earlier, San Francisco and Alameda counties have a curfew in effect from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. San Jose's curfew is from 8:30 p.m. to 5 a.m. for the next 7 days. Santa Clara has the same curfew, and it will continue indefinitely. In San Leandro, a curfew is in effect from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. through June 8th. In the East Bay, Danville, a curfew is in effect from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. until further notice. Walnut Creek, as we showed you at the top of the show, from 6 p.m. now until 5 a.m. for the next week. Pleasant Hill has a curfew for commercial areas from 7 p.m. until 5:30 a.m. until further notice. And Hayward will have a nightly curfew from 8 p.m. through 5 a.m. until June 8th. Those curfews don't apply to first responders, to law enforcement, or people seeking emergency medical services. It also doesn't apply to essential city employees, credentialed media, and the homeless. We have all of this information on our website, KRON4.com. San Francisco was one of the first cities in the Bay Area to institute a curfew.
Law enforcement officers said today it made a huge difference last night in terms of reducing the violence and the vandalism and the looting that we saw Saturday night. KRON4's Dan Kerman has more from Union Square.
Monday afternoon, much of Union Square and nearby Market Street was boarded up, though there were still a few stores that were getting protection in place. Barricades blocked off some streets leading into the square, and multiple teams of heavily armed law enforcement officers were scattered across the area.
For the people that want to express themselves, we welcome you to San Francisco. But we need you to do it peacefully.
At an online news conference Monday morning, San Francisco Police Chief Bill Scott said his department will not tolerate the type of violence, vandalism, and looting the city saw Saturday as peaceful protests turned criminal.
We were overwhelmed.
He said thanks to the mayor's curfew and 208 additional officers from across the state, Sunday night was much better, but by no means crime-free. In all, 87 people were arrested for violating the curfew.
Among those people, we recovered a loaded firearm. We recovered a backpack full of fireworks and explosives. And we recovered other items that I believe were there for the sole purpose of being used as either weapons or being used to vandalize and destroy property.
Chief Scott says those additional officers are still in place, as is the curfew, and he encouraged people to pay attention to it.
We need the public to do the right thing, stay inside, please abide by the curfew order so we can get back to normal, so our mayor can make the decision to lift the restrictions when we have order in our city, when businesses can enjoy their livelihood and conducting their business without having to board up their windows. And that will not happen until we have some order in our city.
Chief Scott says he shares protesters' frustration and anger over the death of George Floyd. He says law enforcement must do better, and he's committed to change. In San Francisco, Dan Kerman, KRON4 News.
This afternoon, thousands attended a peaceful rally at Civic Center Plaza in San Francisco.
Yeah, people, most of whom were wearing masks, gathered to oppose police brutality and ask for changes to police departments across the country. The rally lasted about 3 hours. There were a lot of speakers, including Mayor London Breed and actor Jamie Foxx. Both expressed their frustrations and said they need to see change.
I am angry. I am hurt. I am frustrated. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't want to see one more black man die at the hands of law enforcement. That's what this movement is about. Not one more. Not one more.
And we have to make sure that once this is done, is that we have to try to make change occur when it comes to police brutality. And what I'm saying is that there has to be a deterrent. If that man can be handcuffed and that man can sit on that man's neck for that long and feel comfortable about it, that means that he's not afraid of what's going to happen. We have to change the language. They have to be worried that I could go to jail for this.
Every speaker at the protest today had a similar message. They want people to continue protesting, but do it peacefully, and they're discouraging violence at all levels.
Coming up, investigators in San Mateo County are trying to find out if a jewelry store break-in is connected to recent protests, how business owners in San Carlos are responding after being robbed.
And San Leandro was hit hard by looting after protests yesterday, the areas that were set on fire last night.